Good afternoon. This is Altazar of altazarastrology.com and this YouTube channel. I welcome you to this presentation on the presidential candidacy of Joe Biden and the potential alternatives, such as Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom, and even RFK Jr. uh, given the turmoil and controversy and challenge that's going on now for Joe Biden. So we're going to take a look at the astrology of the United States and then Joe Biden and the current planetary movements that seem to be corresponding with the challenge and turbulence that's going on in the Democratic Party. So I'm going to start out with a chart of the United States. So now you'll see the chart on my left is that of the United States in the inner ring, as I have that noted here, based on the birth date of the United States as officially recognized by most astrologers, and the birth chart of Joe Biden, short of his accurate birth time, not necessarily known, but potentially. And so it's an accurate enough birth chart. And what's going on now in terms of, I have this dated for the planets on July 18th, the other day, and how that is affecting his circumstances. So I'm first going to talk about the chart of the United States, the inner ring here, and point out the transits on the outer ring are the planetary positions of the signs on election day, November 5th of 2024. So from an astrological point of view, looking at these positions, the most poignant and powerful position that seems to represent what is most significant for the United States at this time is the position of Pluto, you'll see here. Pluto takes approximately, here's the natal Pluto of when the United States was born in 1776. Pluto is the most outer planet of the solar system, and it takes 240 years approximately, or longer, or a little less, to go completely around a chart and return to its original zodiacal positions. So, of all the positions in the chart, Pluto can be in anyone's chart the most powerful position for a calling for a major transformation. And an extraordinarily critical moment in the history of this country. I think most of us are recognizing that given the current state of our country and the world. Pluto, opposite Mercury in the natal chart of the United States, is symbolic that the American Revolution was largely about overthrowing the monarchy of King George, England, and the United States simply being a colony that could be exploited by the elite and the wealthy, especially of United Kingdom and England, for their greater power and control. So Pluto and the American Revolution was based not only in the desire for the freedom of the colonies to make their own decisions democratically in regards to the economy and the nature of the land, but to overthrow the autocracy and the control of the monarchy and the economic exploitation that would ensue from that. Well, what is going on now in this country is also a struggle associated with the consolidation of corporate power, the uh, consolidation of wealth in the billionaire class of folks like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, billionaires, uh, who are not necessarily paying their fair share of taxes and uh, as well to what extent this oligarchy and this concentration of wealth in the hands of corporate elites is also beginning to limit, if not dissolve, the democracy that has existed in this country up to this point. And some might say that Donald Trump represents that trend towards consolidation and autocracy. So that's what the Pluto return is about. To what extent this country will retain a legitimate dimension of balance of powers of the executive branch between the Congress and the judicial, or whether there is a trend towards further consolidation of the executive branch and having power and unbridled control, often affected by the money that goes into their campaigns and the support from the corporations and the billionaire wealthy elite, or whether democracy will be largely retained to support a greater economic equity in the middle class uh, to allow for the meritorious upliftment of those who seek to improve their lives and expand a healthy and positive middle class. So, with that said, we look at the candidates, and we're looking at the Democratic Party at this point. I have had a video already on Trump versus Biden and the election possibilities in parts 1, 2, and 3. And so what we're looking at here on this side is not only how does Joe Biden's planets relate to this Pluto position, this 27 degree of Capricorn in the chart of the United States? Well, I would postulate that because Joe Biden's sun sign is at 27 degrees Scorpio and his Venus is at 28 degrees Scorpio, that the reason that he just out of nowhere in 2020 ascended to be the most formidable candidate for the presidency was because of this combination in relationship to the Plutonian challenge of the United States. Again, just to put it in terminology, whether or not we have a plutocracy or whether or not we have a continual democracy. And because a plutocracy is one in which an elite wealthy control the majority of the resources and the control of government. So that's where Joe Biden really does connect from his more working class, middle class orientation politically. However, his challenge is very connected to also to what extent he is really available and effective in retaining his position. So when looking at the chart of Joe Biden, Well, note that although he has a very profound karma of being the Jupiter trine his Mercury, Sun, and Venus, that of a positive, caring, compassionate, even spiritually or religiously oriented man with a good moral compass that could and would engage politics in somewhat of a almost caring, compassionate, ministerial way, which he does, and in many respects. He also has a karma. You'll see here this Uranus opposite in an out of sign opposition. Uranus and Gemini opposite is Sun and Venus. Uh, that he has some lifetimes of having been somewhat of an intransigent rebel, uh, bucking the trends, kind of a maverick, if you will, even still to a certain extent, of the majority or the organization of his party or affiliations. And so it is no coincidence that right now, see the planet Uranus, and this is for July 18th of 2024. This is what has been occurring, in fact, over the past 3 weeks or so. Uranus is in its once in a lifetime position opposite his sun sign. His sun is at 27 Scorpio, Uranus at 26 Taurus. So when Uranus is opposite a person's sun sign and they're involved in politics or some kind of humanitarian organization, uh, it can be a time when all of a sudden there is rebellion or uh, unexpected disruptions in his identity expression and his political movement and or candidacy or leadership in a political process. And that has become more formidable as of late. You'll see Mars at 28 degrees Taurus. Now, I talked about in the Trump attempted assassination video how this position of Mars was in a exact adverse angle to the Mars in Donald Trump's chart, along with the Uranus, the same combination, which provoked potential political violence in regards to Donald Trump's experience. Well, and in fact, because Biden has his sun sign in a direct adverse position with Donald Trump's Mars, they both of them have quite a contentious, conflicting difference of approach to their politics as well as their personalities and attitudes. But aside from that, because they both have the similar degree position that is adverse to the Uranus Mars combination, that's why the both of them have had, in the course of the past week or two, significant disruption or challenges in regards to the expression of their identity or the political developments. For Biden, it's much more of a challenge because Trump, the Uranus, was not affecting his sun sign in Gemini, whereas for Biden, he has had double trouble. The Mars and Uranus moving together through Taurus, opposite his Mercury, Sun, and Venus. I don't know if he has an astrologer or not, but uh, if he is able to persevere, let's put it that way, past this Mars thing, I'm not even surprised he got COVID recently, because the Mars opposition is still directly opposite his Venus, even in his sun sign to some extent. He is now, this week, would be in the worst experience of being challenged by political adversaries, not only from the derogatory and denigrating uh, speeches at the Republican National Convention this week, but also from the challenges that are more subtle within his own party, even including certain more prominent leaders in the Senate and in Congress, subtly trying to coax his uh, desire to drop out of the race. And so, if this, we're now going to look at his astrology at the Democratic Convention. And also on election day. So we'll bring up those charts and see what those reveal. And then we're going to take a look at Kamala Harris, one of the considered alternatives. So let's take a look here and see what those charts reveal. So now we see on the left, we have the Democratic Convention occurring on August 22nd, and we have the election day chart. So what this is showing is if Joe Biden doesn't drop out of his candidacy by the Democratic convention, we see that it doesn't look good at the convention because you see that Uranus has not really, it went retrograde and then it moved ahead and it's still solidly at 27, exactly opposite his sun sign, which again, it can imply a rebellion, a conflict, unexpected betrayals, or unexpected loss of support or rebellion against his candidacy. So that doesn't look good. But on the other hand, it's possible he could weather that storm. But on the other hand, we see the Saturn position here in Pisces in a trine to his Mars. Well, that's for the election. Let's come back here. The Saturn here is not in a supportive political position at the convention. It is more so on election day, but not at the convention. So this Mercury in Leo, adverse to his Mercury and going retrograde, also shows somewhat turbulent debate in regards to his candidacy or the viability of his candidacy. And more so, we note that now, and even through the upcoming month, when we get to the convention, the planet Pluto at 0 degrees Aquarius is an adverse angle to his moon. And that implies even more turbulence or challenge associated with his own physical health or well-being, and can also imply certain turbulence within his family or potential discord associated with the degree to which he may have support. And we see that on election day, not only is Pluto still in that adverse angle to his moon, but the planet Mars in Leo is adverse to his moon on that day, which shows there could be quite a turbulent and even combative uh, energy that doesn't settle into an easy sensibility about whether or not he has been elected and or accepted as being elected by the public. So that's not to say that he couldn't necessarily win on election day, as I shared in part 3, part 2 of the previous videos. He does have the favorable Saturn to Mars on election day. He has more favorable political planetary influences on election day than Donald Trump does. But he still has some adversity here associated with this Uranus opposition, although it's out of the direct connection, but could reemerge within a couple months. So whether or not there's open rebellion and challenge to his legitimacy as president from the MAGA Republicans, that could be indicated by this Mars challenge that could come up a couple months after the election or within a couple months. So now we're going to take a look at Kamala Harris. So now we're looking at the charts of Kamala Harris, her natal chart on the right side. That birth time is not necessarily accurate, but most of the chart is relatively accurate. And then on the left is the chart of the United States. So again, we ask the question, to what extent does this candidate connect with the most critical issue I've talked about earlier, the Plutonian issue in the chart of the United States? Well, number one, that stands out quite obvious, is that Kamala Harris, her Saturn, you'll see here, is at 28 degrees Aquarius. That means she has a calling to have a lifelong service orientation in politics. And that Saturn is almost in an exact conjunction with the moon of the United States. So that implies that she has a sense of responsibility for the well-being and social welfare, and especially that of even women in the United States, as well as a somewhat more liberal care and compassion for the health and well-being of the population of the United States. And yet, you'll note that her sun is in Libra, 27 degrees, opposite her moon in Aries. And that 27-degree opposition is, you see in the chart of the United States, in a direct, almost exact square to Pluto. So that implies that as much as she is an activist seeking to be a well-heeled and cultivated communicator with the Sun, Mercury, and Sun in Libra, Mercury in Scorpio, but opposite the moon in Aries, that of a forceful, assertive personality. It's not in a harmonious connection with the more essential or deeper purpose of consideration for the issues that are most powerfully affected in the United States at this time, being that challenge of the plutocracy or the elite and the corporate consolidation of wealth and power. So she is definitively not a better candidate for dealing with that kind of core issue that the United States is grappling with now than Joe Biden. as I've shown, his much more complementary positions and even why he ascended to the presidency in his direct connection to this Pluto Mercury issue the United States is grappling with at this time. And so that's number one here. Number two, I'm going to bring up just her chart on election day. I don't think I need to bring up the chart for the Democratic Convention. So there you go. We have her chart shown for the election day. And what this is, as I'm clearing out other charts, is showing that I'm not seeing any really favorable, definitive celebration, if not positivity, for her on November 5th of 2024, quite frankly. There's no Venus or Jupiter connection here. There's no favorable, well, especially we're looking for a Mercury in terms of the communication dynamics that are going on in that day. In fact, the Pluto is moving just slightly adverse to her sun and moon, and Neptune's not really doing anything for her as it is for Joe Biden in his chart. And the Pluto is favorable to Joe Biden. So, quite frankly, I do not see anything that supports a celebration or positivity. In fact, the Saturn position in Pisces here, opposite her Uranus, symbolic of her political affiliations and activism and organizational connections, is somewhat adverse on election day. So, not a good sign there. And so now, just to offer one other brief alternative, I'm going to turn to what some folks are hoping might be an aspiration for Gavin Newsom, governor of California. So now we're looking at the natal chart of Gavin Newsom. Again, birth time not accurate, but everything else is pretty accurate enough for this kind of reading. And then we're looking at his birth chart placements as they are here around the chart of the United States, as we had done with Kamala Harris. And so what we see here is that his sun sign in Libra, he's also a Libra, just like Kamala Harris, those who tend to be tactful, public-oriented, and politically savvy politicians and social organizational facilitators. And so his sun in a relatively close aspect to Saturn is good for political aspirant in the United States and a public leader. Yet we also see and are looking for this connection to Pluto, as I've been expounding throughout this reading, and his Uranus at 26 Virgo. And I'll also mention that, he is born in the Chinese year of the sheep, which is relatively favorable in the year of the dragon into the year of the snake, as we are in Chinese astrology. This 26-degree position of his Uranus, the planet of politics and organizational connection, is in a direct and favorable connection to the Pluto of the United States. So that does imply that he can help facilitate somewhat revolutionary or progressive, if you will, orientation towards maintaining the democracy and challenging the plutocracy or the elite control of corporations and the elite billionaire class towards a more balanced middle class. So that's favorable for him. When we look at his Jupiter in Leo, that does imply he has a direct charismatic confidence in his ability to engage the public. So that, he has some of the basics here. And even more so, he has the Mercury in Scorpio in a favorable aspect to the sun sign of the United States, which is good for direct kind of sense of supportive policy making for the progress of the identity and the evolving identity of this country. And so overall, and his Saturn position being directly in Aries, favorable to the political environment of the United States, Uranus at 8 degrees Gemini, his Saturn at 8 degrees Aries, does indicate his political savvy and leadership strength can support a political direction for the United States. So he is certainly much more of a favorable candidate vis-a-vis the current circumstances of the United States than Kamala Harris is. His Mars also in Sagittarius, favorable aspect to the moon of the United States in an assertive, direct confidence and assertive ability to address the everyday people and their personal challenges, problems, and or work-related issues. So next, we want to take a look at, how do things look on election day? So now I'm first going to focus on the Democratic Convention conclusion and then election day on November 5th. And so as far as that goes, the Jupiter in Gemini, which will be moving from around 15 degrees through 17 degrees Gemini on the days of the convention, are favorably, very favorably trining his sun sign in Libra, 16 degrees Libra, almost exact. Jupiter is one of the most favorable energies for expansion, growth, and the ascension of someone's stature with the public. Secondly, as much as we have that Mercury and Leo adversity with the Scorpio planets that Biden has, this Mercury here is in a well, it's not too much of a challenging at the point of the end of the convention, but its movement in retrograde does move to a favorable trine with his 21 degrees Sagittarius. As I'm looking there, that it's going to be in a sustained exact trine to his Mars through the end of August, which implies a very favorable, strong public relations and communicative assertive ability on his part during that period of time. And then we also note the Uranus position at 27 degrees. Taurus will be in very close connection to his Uranus in a trine, favorable aspect, favoring a sudden and unexpected yet progressive upliftment of his stature and ability to engage an organization and or political movement. So these are all favorable, and not to mention that the position of Saturn itself during this time will be somewhat presenting a challenge of stress, but on the other hand, it does lend towards a favorable uh, type of dynamic with his moon position, which lends towards support from women and other mainstream working class and pluralities of the population. So far, I've seen the most favorable influence here for him in terms of the Democratic convention. And now we look at election day and note that on election day, the Uranus position still is very favorable to his Uranus in terms of a progressive and being an advanced humanitarian and organizational influence for the country compared to the opposition of rebellion or unexpected adversity for Biden. Uh, we also see the Saturn going retrograde to a direct connection to his Mercury, his planet for communications and relating to the public and public relations, highly favorable for a political outcome on election day and post election day, not found in Donald Trump's chart per se on that day. Uh, his Venus in a position right before and just post election day on his Mars, a favorable celebratory kind of energy, positivity. And
For that, your phone needs a mobile or Wi-Fi connection first.
let's move out here and let's forget about my phone talking to me at this time. In fact, we're going to try to turn off my phone so it doesn't talk during the middle of a. There we go. Uh, okay. So this is a favorable connection. And so now I'm going to lastly turn to JFK Jr. Okay, we're back, and I have silenced my phone so it's not going to start talking during this presentation. So we're now going to present the charts. Actually, before JFK Jr., Gretchen Whitmer, and what is indicated here. And so you're going to see now on the left, and we're just doing a quick perspective here for Gretchen Whitmer. And again, her birth time's not real accurate, but again, the planets are relatively accurate. And so her chart on election day does not show anything significant for a favorable potential outcome, let alone a favorable connection with the current challenges or issues for the United States. So that is what we are looking at here. The there's this, especially the Uranus aspect, is adverse to her sun sign, somewhat like Joe Biden. Especially the Saturn position is not lending any kind of favorable political, economic connection or dynamics. The Neptune position, which is favorable to some extent for her spiritual growth and her Jupiter, but isn't lending anything politically as it does for Joe Biden. So, and the Pluto position as well is somewhat affecting her favorable uh, political dynamics in her locality where the moon is located. But otherwise, not a favorable chart, especially vis-a-vis the United States at this time, possibly at a future date, but not at this time. So we will take that out of the picture and move this chart over here and show election day for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So one thing I will point out, as I mentioned in my earlier videos on Trump and Biden and the RFK factor, I believe that's on video number 3 of that election perspective, is that Robert F. Kennedy's Jr.'s natal chart, which you see here in the inner ring of the chart, is laid out in the outer ring here of the chart of the United States. And you'll see, look at this collection of Venus, the Sun, and Mercury. In fact, his degree for the Sun and Venus are almost, and Mercury, are almost identical degree positions that Joe Biden has on 3 of his planets, Sun, Mercury, and Venus. However, the difference is that Joe Biden's are in Scorpio here in the chart of the United States, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s are here right there directly tangent, if not conjunct, especially his sun sign, with the planet Pluto in the chart of the United States. So I would venture to say that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., regardless, and I'm not taking a political position here, I'm just objectively offering the position of the planets as they relate to this most powerful issue, the Plutonian issue of the chart of the United States, that second to Joe Biden's complementary positions to Pluto and Mercury opposition in the natal chart of the United States, Robert F. Kennedy, of all the prospects that we've looked at, Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, and Kamala Harris, Robert F. Kennedy, and even Donald J. Trump, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., in my opinion, has the most favorable complementary positions to the chart of the United States at this time, short of Joe Biden, and and possibly even better than Joe Biden. Whether he has truly a chance of being elected is a possibility, given that his natal moon is almost directly complementary in Cancer to the sun sign of the United States. His Jupiter position in Gemini is favorable in the relationship section of the United States to complement working in favorable relations with the political parties to Saturn. His Sun and Venus are directly conjunct the Pluto position, showing him having a highly effective, powerful identity and communicative ability to relate to the uh, upper class, billionaire class, as well as challenge it as he has as an environmental lawyer over many years to be more engaged in a democratic and supportive and nurturing equitable distribution of wealth for American society here in the House of Money and Economics. So, not only that, but he has Neptune in Libra and an exact trine to the moon of the United States, which implies that he has a natural, intuitive, if not emotional or personal compassion for cultivating a more equitable and health oriented, healthcare oriented structure for the United States. If you know anything about him, he has dramatically challenged the drug companies and other chemical companies in terms of the adverse aspects to the health and welfare of the mainstream population of the United States as an environmental lawyer. So, again, I'm not attempting here to be an advocate of any of these politicians. I'm just attempting to offer the most objective astrological implications for what is complementary to the chart of the United States and the social, political, economic welfare of the people of the United States. And quite frankly, either Joe Biden, but in my opinion, in some respects, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Is a more formidable and favorable, most complementary candidate to be a successful president of the United States at this time. And his chart on election day also lends towards that favorability. And the Saturn position to his moon, the Sun position to his Mars, and the moon position that complements his Saturn position, and also the Uranus position, especially, which, as I've shared, tend to be adverse to Biden in terms of unpredictability and uncertainty, is highly complementary to the Venus position of Robert F. Kennedy. And when it does move out of retrograde and forward to 27 and 28 degrees Taurus, as it will, that will very favorably highlight a progressive humanitarian and balanced democratic orientation for his leadership in this country. So we shall see what the astrology portends at this time. But this is my exposition of the possibilities related to the dramatic uncertainty associated with Joe Biden's candidacy at this time. If you found this video informative, please click like. If you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe and get notifications of new and interesting perspectives on the political economic trends and that of unique individuals, as well as even upcoming Zoom meetings that I have, one coming up next Wednesday on the astrology of your child or your children, which is also discussed on another video just prior to this one. Be well and take care.